You're listening to That Gets My Goat.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to That Gets My Goat.
This is Rish Outfield.
And I'm Big Anklevich. And we're back with our usual summer movie hoedown.
Except that you haven't seen anything.
Yeah. I kind of suck that way, don't I?
Well, no, you're very busy, and maybe there weren't any movies that you wanted to see.
Well, I would have liked to have seen SpiderMan, but I just never got a chance. I even had my brother-in-law saying, yeah, I want to see it. Let's go see it together. And I couldn't find a time to do it.
Well, do you think that you will see it at some point? You can still talk about it, or should I say a few words now?
I think I will see it at some point, but I think it would also probably be fine to say a few words if you would like to.
Well, the interesting thing about Amazing Spider-Man, well, there's two interesting things. And one is a question that I'm not going to answer, which is how necessary was Amazing Spider-Man? And really anybody that goes to see that movie has to ask themselves that. And that's one of the reasons why I wondered if you had seen it at all, is that you had heard that, you know, it's that story again, or you had heard that it's bad or whatever the deal is. But that's really what the movie had against it from the very beginning, is it's so recent and it's such a familiar story because of a huge hit movie a decade ago. And then the other thing that it's got against it is just everything is being compared. You compare it to these Tobey Maguire, Sam Raimi movies that are fresh in everybody's mind, and they were trying to start a new franchise with this, you know, start from ground zero or square one or whatever the correct term is, and build to that. But it makes for not a very satisfying movie because they choose not to tie up the loose ends. They choose to plant seeds and then not have them sprout because they're like, well, this is just the first installment in a whole new series. It's like Frodo didn't destroy the ring in Fellowship of the Ring. You're like, yeah, but that's not the same thing, is it?
I guess that's hard. I'm not exactly, since I haven't seen it, sure what you're referring to, but...
Okay, then let's talk about that again, maybe at the end of our next conversation, because eventually they're going to reboot the Batman franchise too, and we can see the mistakes that they made.
True.
And the things that they did right with Spider-Man and say, well, let's apply that to Batman.
Okay.
In fact, let's just talk about Batman right now. Is that okay? About The Dark Knight Rises? Because
sure, yeah.
This is still opening week of Dark Knight Rises, and we meant to get together yesterday and talk about it, but your child, the infant, just was not a supporter of that idea.
Yeah, he did wake up a few times. I think maybe we just talk very loud, and he is just down the hall, so we're going to have to start recording outdoors now. We're going to have to get a laptop and go up into the hills.
Well, that would be a fun experiment,
yeah. Especially
if we could get one of those nights when the coyotes are howling.
Yeah.
Or baying. What is it that coyotes do?
I'm not sure. I don't know what baying is.
Okay, so we're going to start our Dark Knight Rises conversation now. But we got to get something out of the way first of all, and that is there's going to be spoilers. We're going to talk about especially the ending of the movie. We're just not going to tiptoe around all that stuff because a lot of whether you enjoyed the movie or not comes down to what you thought of that ending. Right?
That's right, yeah. And I actually tried to have a conversation with a friend of mine at work today. He hadn't seen the film yet, but he did have the soundtrack, and he was listening to it. And so I get, oh, yeah, you saw it? And he's like, oh, no, I haven't seen it. And I was like, oh. And he's like, yeah, but was it good? And so I was trying to tell him what I thought about it without spoiling it, and it wasn't easy. And so, yeah, we're not going to do that here. We are going to spoil the crap out of this film.
Right. So if you are planning on seeing it, go see it. We'll still be here when you come back.
That's right. We'll leave the light on for you.
There is, though, something else that we got to get out of the way. It's the sort of the elephant in the room, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now's probably the time that we should mention, yes, Anne Hathaway was in this movie, and so that makes us biased toward liking it. And, you know, it's not fair, but that's just nature, really. Now, obviously, that's a silly, dumb joke, and it's a roundabout way of me saying we're still going to be ourselves on this. We're still going to just review the movie as though it were a regular movie. as though the movie came out last week instead of this week, as planned. The actual elephant in the room is that there was an incident, a terrible act. And now, do you think that everybody hearing this knows about that? It was a global story, correct?
I would think that most everybody knows. We'll give a quick summation of it just in case. But yeah, there was a shooting at a midnight premiere of this film in Aurora, Colorado, where a piece of crap went into a theater with a bunch of guns and shot up this sold-out theater. It was probably the worst shooting that's happened in America so far. 71, I think it was, or 2 people, upwards of 70, we'll say, people were actually injured, hit by bullets, and 12 of those people have already died, and possible there may be more before all is said and done. So, yeah, it kind of, this whole event kind of put a pall over the opening weekend of The Dark Knight Rises, and it made it kind of impossible to separate the two. You know, you talked about Dark Knight, you also had to include that whole tragedy that came. And the sad thing is, I don't think they're really connected. I think this guy was just looking for a place where a lot of people would be and would be undefended. He found that in a movie theater on opening night of one of the most anticipated movies of the year. So yeah, it's something that we can't ignore. It's a terrible thing, and we feel terrible for the victims, those that were injured and killed, and those that were loved ones of those people. You know, we're also not going to let James Holmes win. We're not going to change the way we live. We're not going to stop doing our podcast. We're not going to give up on the things that we love because he came and did this senseless, stupid act. We're going to continue on with our lives, and we're going to talk about Batman.
And that's the thing. If people say that it's no longer okay to like Batman, or it's no longer okay to enjoy this film, then he won.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like the bad guys win if they're able to sully or ruin something that used to bring you joy. The terrible thing is we've been through this already. Just a decade ago with the Columbine shooting, we saw that the way that the media and the politicians and just people in general, I don't want to say overreacted, but they chose to put the emphasis on the wrong thing. And suddenly everybody was pointing a finger and saying, this is why this happened. And what music were they listening to? And what TV shows did they like to watch? And what books did they have on their shelves? And who can we blame for all of this? And who made them do these things? And it was a terrible time in America, kind of like, you know, the Red Scare. Let's find a scapegoat. Let's find somebody that can explain all this. Let's blame Janet Jackson and her wardrobe malfunction for this, rather than blame people who are in control of their own actions and who make decisions and do terrible things because they're bad people or because they're sick or because they're evil.
Right.
Anyhow, I figured we probably should get that out of the way at the very beginning, because we want to still be able to make jokes. We want to still be able to talk about that shot where Anne Hathaway bends over and you see her butt, as though this other thing didn't happen, because it's difficult to say. But there were lots of people that were like, well, it's inappropriate to talk about how much money that the movie made, or Warner Brothers should give all of that money away, or that movie should never be released on video. You know, things like that, where you're just like, well, it was incidental. Like you said a second ago, if he had gone to a 4th of July picnic where people were watching fireworks, or if he had gone to a church, a midnight mass on Christmas Eve where there's a ton of people in the middle of the night gathered, would you say, you know, let's blame fireworks, or let's blame
church? No more people can go to church because this happened at a church.
He could have gone to Disneyland. He could have gone to a funeral. He could have gone to a school graduation or something like that. Just the fact that there were people there, people that you can kill, is what it was. And a movie theater is one of the few places where you can get together with a bunch of people and there's no security. Nobody checking your bag or any of that stuff. And he found and exploited a weakness, an innocence in our culture And now that's probably going to have to change.
Yeah, it was one of the last safe places where people could assemble and not have to worry. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's taken away. Now, we won't be able to assemble there innocently anymore. That we'll have to go through a metal detector just to get in the door or something. Kind of stuff sucks. I wish it didn't have to be necessary.
It does suck, and I'm sure. Well, you know what? I hope that I'm wrong. I hope that there's not suddenly an influx of this is bad and this is corrupting our children, and let's check and see what these guys had on their Netflix queue and all that, so that we can blame that and say instead, how can we prevent this from happening in the future, or what can we learn from this and all that, instead of just there's nothing that can be accomplished by pointing fingers and yelling. Is there?
No, I don't think so.
And maybe there will be metal detectors outside the doors of movie theaters from now on. But if you are a psycho and you want to take out a bunch of people, you'll find a place and a way to do it if you try hard enough.
Yeah, there's always going to be a place, because, we're people and we eventually will trust each other. And yeah, the bad people will take advantage of the trust. And, unfortunately, there's no way to make it stop, because we're still going to be people.
But yeah, it cast a shadow over all of the excitement that people had for this movie. And people weren't talking about the movie anymore, and they were talking about this other thing. That's too bad. A lot of people worked really, really hard on this, and I don't know. We had planned to do episodes talking about it, and we're still going to. We're going to move on, and we're going to hopefully not talk about this part anymore, and just talk about whether the movie was good or not, or how we responded to the movie.
Right.
I saw it that same night. I saw it opening night, and then you saw it the next day, right? On Saturday?
Does that count as opening night? You saw it Thursday night, right?
I guess so, or you can say Friday morning, whatever you want to do.
Okay, then I did see it the next day, yes.
But was the response to the movie on Saturday different than the response to the movie on Friday because of what happened? And the answer is probably yeah, right?
Yeah, I don't know that I noticed it per se, but it probably was. It's hard to know for sure because I wasn't inside of anybody else's head. I know that I actually, at one point in the middle of the movie, stopped for a second and thought, whoa, what if something like that happened right now? A thought like that would have never gone through my mind any other time. So yeah, that is strange. But there's other things, I guess, that we could say that also hung in the air over this film and its opening that would have been there anyways, no matter when it would have opened. We had earlier this year a great big film called The Avengers, which made a boatload of money and eventually surpassed the big boatload of money that The Dark Knight made a few years ago. So now with its sequel coming out, there's kind of that whole DC versus Marvel rivalry in the air. There was that, you had to choose whether you liked one or the other. You had to choose which one was the one that was for you. And I know I got on Facebook the day before I saw the film, and a friend of mine had gotten on there and said, yeah, it looks like Chris Nolan just beat Joss Whedon about the head and shoulders. And I thought, come on, really? Does it have to be a competition? Because I didn't feel that way about it at all. I didn't see it that way. I didn't want it to be that way. I wanted it to just be, these are good movies. I knew it was going to be a good movie. I mean, it was Chris Nolan doing a third Batman movie. The other two were both great. And Avengers was great. But, having seen both of them, I knew Dark Knight Rises was not going to be similar, really, in tone or style or anything. I mean, yes, they're superheroes, but that's as far as it goes. It just made me sad. It made me bummed out. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, that has been the case ever since Marvel began in 1961. that you have to have your publisher, the one that you like. I like Marvel characters. I like DC characters. And I've had people say in 2008 when Iron Man came out and then Dark Knight came out, it's like, well, which one did you like? It's like, well, can't I like both? It's like, no, one must live and one must die. I'm just like, why? I don't understand that. And I understand the publishing aspect of it because you only have so much money and you can only buy so many books or whatever. And they're in direct competition with one another. They each come out in the same day. So which one do you buy? Which one do you support? And all that. But as far as movies go, I mean, unless you're really, really poor, can't you go to both?
Yeah, I would think.
And the thing with those two movies in 2008 is I loved both Dark Knight and Iron Man.
Right.
And am I
Me too.
different from everybody else?
I would think not.
It's just weird because I've heard a lot of people, as soon as Avengers came out and was making all these records saying, well, in July when Dark Knight comes out, yeah, then you'll see some numbers. To their credit, Warner Brothers, they took the high road in the weeks leading up to Dark Knight coming out. And they kept saying, they made press releases like, it's not about the box office. It's not about how big the opening is. It's about, how good this movie is. And, we're really proud of Dark Knight and we don't care about little things like records and all that. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. That's noble of them. Unfortunately, in the days leading up to it, about a week and a half before it came out, suddenly they started talking about, well, our tracking says that we're going to kick the crap out of Avengers. And there's more pre-sales of tickets for this than there were for Avengers. And so, wee-hee, and all that. And I thought, oh, you know what? You had the moral superiority and then you threw it away.
You had the chance to be a really morally. Sorry, I blew that. I blew it.
You blew it this time, not one of others.
I was going to say they blew it. Instead, I blew it trying to tell them they blew it.
But it seemed like Dark Knight was going to have its work cut out for it from the very beginning because of the kind of movie that it is. At least judging by the last one from 2008's Dark Knight, it's an adult superhero movie. It's a movie for grown-ups.
Right.
And it's long. Now, Avengers was super long too, but also Avengers was in 3D and Dark Knight wasn't. I think Warner Brothers was wise to say it's not about the money. So let's dwell on how good the movie is instead. But I don't know. I have a cousin that really, really likes DC Comics, and for some reason he did feel the need to say, oh, F Spider-Man. F him and stuff. And I'm just like, well, wait, I love Batman and Spider-Man. And he's like, no, Spider-Man sucks. I was like, no, he doesn't. And I what is it? Where does that come from?
I don't know. Maybe it's just a male thing. Maybe the testosterone in us makes us compete. It's like sports. I mean, you can't like the Giants and the Jets. You have to like one or the other. You can't be a fan of both teams because they're crosstown rivalries.
But that's because they're playing each other, right?
Right. I guess it's not really the same, but I don't know. Maybe they play each other in the box office or something. I don't know. Maybe it's not that, but maybe men just feel like they have to have the thing that they can root for or something, and the other things have to suck.
Okay, well, you have a brother-in-law that you saw the movie with.
Uh-huh.
And I'd never met him before, but I'd heard you tell me about him a lot and about the way that he raised his children and stuff. And it's a DC Comics household. But does he say F Spider-Man and F X-Men and F Stan Lee and I hope he burns in hell?
No, he's definitely not that way. He's like you are with DC and Marvel, except for, leans onto the opposite side of the scale. He loves both. His kids know plenty of Marvel stuff, not as well as they know DC, because he knows DC and, is able to teach them more about it. But he loves them both. He just likes one a little bit more than the other is all.
Okay, because in a perfect world, and I know it's not a perfect world, in a perfect world, you would want both of the movies to be good. In fact, you would want every movie that comes out in the theater to be good.
Seriously, yeah.
Then we all win.
Yeah, totally. Then you never waste your money on a crappy film.
Anyhow.
Or your time, your precious minutes of life.
But what you said, I also read that post that our friend Ian put on Facebook. And it upset me. It angered me. And that's partly because I love Joss Whedon so much. And, he's just such a likable guy that you wouldn't want to see somebody punch him. You know what I mean?
Right.
It was just, and if you did see somebody punch Joss Whedon, you wouldn't be like, woohoo, like Ian was. It was weird. I don't know. I think we both responded in similar ways to that.
Yeah, it's kind of sad too because, I saw that and I was kind of irritated with it. And because of seeing that, I went to the film like with my dukes up. I was ready to try and find what was wrong with Dark Knight Rises because of that. I was looking for every little fault. And I could tell when we were done watching the film, and my brother-in-law was like, yeah, so what did you think? And I was saying this, that, this. And he's like, oh, well, I really liked it. It was better the second time. I could tell that a lot of those things either didn't bother him or he didn't even notice them at all. Stuff that I found to be bad about it and wanting in it. And I don't know how much that may have tainted my experience. Kind of irritates me that it did because I didn't want it to.
Well, it's hard it's hard to go into a movie, especially a franchise movie, with no baggage at all. For example, when Heath Ledger died after Dark Knight, I guess there was a pall about that.
True.
That's an aspect of the movie that's hard to divorce from the movie. And of course now Dark Knight Rises has something that's hard to divorce from it.
Yeah.
But when you saw the commercials and all this, and they were saying, the final installment in the Dark Knight trilogy, the end, this is it. It prepares you, puts your mind in a different place than if it's just, the new adventure of Batman in a continuing series.
True.
It's because you and I are sort of movie savvy. It's really rare that we go into a movie with no expectations and no baggage at all. In fact, it probably never happens. It used to happen for me when I'd go to test screenings. We hadn't seen a trailer. We don't even know who's in it and things like that. But when you've made the choice to spend your $8 or whatever and go stand in line and get the tickets or whatever, you've already determined that this is something that's worth your time. Or in like the case of Battleship, we went in that expecting it to be a really bad movie, partly because I was against the whole idea of making a movie based on a board game, but throwing aliens into it.
Yeah.
I don't know. It sounds like we're starting to talk about our feelings about the movie. So maybe we should quit right now and let people go their way. And we'll come back in our next episode and we'll talk about our feelings for the movie. Would that be all right?
Yes. Let's talk about our feelings. We'll talk about our feelings in the next episode of That Gets My Goat. Thanks for listening, everybody.
One thing I promised myself I would do, though, before we go, Big.
So, you have come back to die with your city?
No. I came back because there's a sale at Old Navy, 20% off this week. Couldn't miss it.
All right. This has been Rick Outfield.
And Big Anklevich. See you later, folks.
Good night.
That Gets My Goat is produced under a Creative Commons 3.0 license. Boy, they must really think a lot of themselves.
Well, there was Magic Mike and there was Ted. Anyhow, let's just skip on over to Batman, okay? So this is still the opening weekend or week of Dark Knight Rises, and you and I saw it together. My cousin said he absolutely had to see it opening night, midnight, and he would go by himself if he had to. And his wife said, that she would never go with him, and hoped that something tragic happened to stain the love of Batman he has. And so he said, well, I'm just going to go alone then. And I said, oh, no, don't go alone. And so we went together. Yeah, one of those midnight showings. So loud, so full of really young people, and I guess young equals loud to me now. We were never that loud.